Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we figure out how to build and run a SaaS. I'm Benedikt.
And I'm Brian. Each week we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we work on our products and keep the lights on by trying to stay focused. Today is March 31st, and I am feeling a bit conflicted.
This is episode number 35, and I'm happy to welcome a guest this episode, and it's Tracy Osborn. Hi, Tracy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Tracy, you're currently program manager at TinySeed, that's right?
Yes, yeah.
What's your job there? Like, what are you doing there?
Yeah, so TinySeed is most people probably have heard of it, but just in case someone hasn't, it's a remote accelerator for bootstrap businesses. And as the program manager, I basically run the day-to-day program. So I'm majority of my time is set up working with the founders in this accelerator because it's all remote, which is actually really useful right now that we're not an in-person accelerator. We all patted ourselves in the back recently being like, woo, that was a good decision. And I set up the weekly meetings with the founders. I do the mentorship requests to the founders and the mentors we work with. I kind of do all the administration, kind of keeping things running, being the right hand of Einar and Rob. And the three of us, so Rob Walling, the founder of Microconf, is the founder of TinySeed, and then Einar Volset is the co-founder of TinySeed, and he's kind of like our guru around investing and finance and stuff like that. And the three of us run the program together. But they kind of do like the big picture ideas, and then I kind of run the day-to-day stuff, in addition to lots of other tasks. It's nice being on a very small team, is that we all wear a lot of different hats.
That's the usual thing with small teams, right? You basically end up doing everything.
Yeah, and that's what I prefer because I'm sure you're going to get into this in a second. But my past life before TinySeed is I was a founder myself. I ran a wedding startup called Wedding Lovely, which was like a SaaS and a marketplace in the wedding area, which I shut down right before I started TinySeed. And when I was interviewing with Rob, we had this whole discussion, this whole like part of the interview where I was saying, he was asking me about like, do you really want a job? Because as a founder, it's really hard to imagine being an employee, right? And we talked about this. He's like, what's the chance that you're going to be in like 2, 3, 5 years being like, okay, I'm going to go off and do my own startup again? And I was like, well, can't say I'm not going to. And at that time, I wasn't like, zero. Yeah, exactly. Like I'll be honest. Like every other job I've had before this has been completely awful. And it was those two jobs. Like I've been burned any other time I had a job. But this time this is my forever job. This is actually a really, really fun thing to work on. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm not a founder myself, but I'm in a position as a founder where, because you're wearing those different hats, there's lots of different things to work on. You are right on the front lines. It has all the aspects of being a founder while also being an employee.
Mm-hmm. So the great thing about a small team is that it's almost a requirement that you feel a sense of ownership. Yeah. And there are enough like important things going on, high leverage things going on that you can feel like you are an owner of a particular project.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because Rob is running so many other things because he runs Microconf and he runs Startups for the Rest of Us podcast. I get to help out on those projects as well. But it also means that in terms of like figuring out what's going on with TinySeed, that's been left on my shoulders, which has been quite an honor. I'm actually at 1 year of being in TinySeed next month, because it's not April yet.
Well, congrats.
So, awesome. And the reason that we brought you on today is initially you were invited to speak at Femtoconf, but then, stuff happened and Femtoconf is no longer a thing this year.
I'm so sad.
So, yeah, it's really sad. I was really looking forward to meet everyone. But we agreed that you'd speak at Femtoconf, and I really liked the topic. And I think it will make a very interesting episode to basically talk about that. And the topic was something like the distracted founder, like how to get the different ways we get distracted and how to get back on track or something like that. And I feel like in this year of working with TinySeed and seeing a lot of companies and a lot of founders, that probably inspired some of the insights from that, right?
Yeah, totally. I did a little bit of mentorship before Tiny Seed, but I kind of jumped into the full mentorship experience at Tiny Seed. And it's been a fascinating place to be in this like third person view, to see these different companies going through challenges and the way that they react to those challenges and how they work together, and then kind of pulling in insights from that. So that was the impetus for that FemtoConf submission, which I'm still just devastated about, and I will be bugging you whenever that gets rescheduled. Like, I'm speaking there, right? Yeah. But it's good to be able to take what I've learned and give it here as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you talk really then about what are some of the most common ways that you see founders get distracted, and what can they do to mitigate against that? So it's funny in this virus crisis, I want to say that the talk originally was about when everything was normal, right? Which is like, okay, cool, the world is moving on, everything is fine. And so the things that you get distracted on as a founder, especially when you're a one-person team, that can be preventing you from making progress. And this is a lot from what I've learned at Tiny Seed, but a lot of it also is personal experience from when I was in Wedding Lovely, because after I worked on Wedding Lovely for about 9 years, and which is crazy to think about because that's like an age when it comes to startups. It's a lifetime, yeah.
A lot of that was this feeling of okay, I'm working, I'm making progress, or something happening, like going to work every day and making progress on something, but then looking back at the last year and then realizing that my progress in terms of actual metrics, like how well the company is doing, was actually little to none. Because the things I would get distracted on, and this is something that I think a lot of founders get distracted on, which is one of my first points, was design details, especially as a small team. And this is something I fell into as a designer. My background's in design. It's when you're working on a new feature and you want to get it out the door, a lot of founders fall into this trap, myself included, of wanting to look perfect, work perfect, really fretting over those little, like the way that the button looks, the spacing, the alignment and whatnot. And one thing that this can do is like really slows down actually getting the feature out. And this is something that I did myself. This is something I see sometimes with founders in Tiny Seed, where you just focused on this little design detail or making everything perfect, but perfect is the enemy of, what is that? Enemy of good? I forgot the phrase is. Yep. I just whiffed it there.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one.
So that was that was the thing that I fell into the most was that. Another one that we find that I did as well is focusing on the wrong metrics, because sometimes you might be really looking at, say, how much revenue you're making, but you don't realize that your churn is really high. And when you're looking at your revenue, you might be like, oh, I just need to increase the funnel and get more people in, but you don't realize you're losing progress in another place in your metrics. So one thing I wanted to do a shout out to was Craig Hewitt's talk at Microconf Europe this last October. I believe it's online, and I'll send you the link so you can add to the notes. But he talks a lot about the various metrics and the ones you need to focus on at the moment. And when I watched this talk, I was like, whoa, I really wish I had this talk when I was running Running Lovely, because I would have realized that there's all these things that I was working on. I was focusing on mainly just like, what's the money coming in the door, without realizing that I was losing money and I was basically hindering my progress because I didn't realize that my metrics, like something else, was so poor that, I was increasing the funnel. I was like doing this cold emailing. I was working on the wrong things without realizing that there's other parts of that were holding me back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what strikes me about those two examples you just gave is we're talking about being distracted, and the opposite of that would be focused. But both of those is like the founder being focused, but on the entirely wrong thing, the wrong metric, or the wrong font size or padding of a button. Where do you? How do you think through then? Is this something that is worth my focus right now? Like, how do I know that this is that the design does need to be right so that people are having a good experience or not. Like that's something that you could think through. I do need to be thinking about these metrics, but how do I know it's the right one? Like what's a framework of questions that a founder can ask themselves to stay focused on the right things?
One of the things that is, it's really hard to figure those things out on your own, which is one of the reasons why I realized that masterminds and talking to people who are other founders is so important. So Tiny Seed, obviously we get together and we do these, we get together on calls and talk through our problems and whatnot. And you just have that other person who says, that mentor or advisor or, another founder that's in your group that says, hey, is this really important? Like, do you really need to be doing this? And sometimes we'll have people saying, okay, hey, look at this design I'm working on. How do I get this padding just perfect? And you have to have this other person who says, the padding is not perfect, yes. Yeah. But instead of like worrying about it right now, like, can you just get this feature out? And it's really nice to have someone else out there to kind of push you along. One thing we did at Microconf recently is we launched a Slack workspace. And there's a masterminds channel to kind of help people find masterminds, and there's Mastermind Jam. If you're looking for other people to partner with, to kind of talk through what you're working on and keep yourself stay on track, which is really great in general. One of my notes for, maybe we can move into just being distracted by everything right now. One of my notes was giving yourself a deadline or like a check-in or something. And when you're on a mastermind, you have to say what you've been working on, what's your progress, what are you being distracted by. Having a regular weekly call with other people where they can check in on with you, they can tell you that you're working on the wrong things in their opinion, that they can give you, like, it's nice to say like, oh, Friday, I have a call with so-and-so, even if it's a friendly call with friends. But it kind of forces you also to continue working and get stuff done before that call, so you have something to bring up. So it's not really a framework of questions to ask yourself. A lot of that is just, I think, just being aware that you could be working on the wrong thing, but it's just leading into what's the way that you can ask for help from other people, and getting that feedback from people who don't have that founder blinder of like that tunnel of focus that you have. They can see the big picture.
Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. Just getting out of the vacuum of your own little space. And it's one of those funny things where it always feels so much easier to have perspective and give a friend advice where like somebody asks you for, you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you should do. Da, 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 da. But if you find yourself in that exact same position, it's so hard to step out of your own context. So that's great advice. That makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Do you see any recurring patterns, like what people get distracted with other than paddings and font size?
What about this virus and refreshing the news? Just constant.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that happens for me.
Yeah, last week was a complete wash for me. I hope Rob Walling's not listening to this because no, we actually had a talk. We had a talk between the three of us saying that it's okay to be distracted right now. But last week was awful in terms of productivity for me and the things I need to do. And so this week I've actually implemented some tactics stronger than I normally do for myself. Like one thing I've always resisted like planning out my day hour by hour. I liked having the freedom to kind of choose what I want to work on at a moment. But now that I'm distracted by all this news cycle that's constantly happening, whenever I reach like I'll be working and then there'll be a little thing that challenges me. And my brain, when I'm challenged, wants to like go look at something else, get distracted by something else. And so it's like go off to New York Times and start refreshing it and start checking the stats and the latest news and stuff like that. So lately I've started hour by hour, like focusing my day. 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. I have breakfast. 9 a.m. I have to go. 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm like deep work focused. 10 a.m. I can check the news. And this is something I never had to do before, but now it's like, now I'm giving myself permission to say, hey, I can check it at this point. And then I have this hour where if I get challenged by something, I get frustrated by something, and the urge goes to like go distract myself by something else, I can look at the time and say, okay, there's only, 25 minutes left in this hour. Let's buckle down and continue working for just this hour, and then I can check. So this is something I never had to do before, but it's this is the world we live in at this current moment, this kind of like scary current moment. Another thing I've been working on, I didn't have to do before, is changing my work location. Because when I was I had an office, and it was nice to walk into the office and be like, this is the place that work gets done. But now we're all working from home. And so whenever I worked from home, I'd be on the couch or on my desk. And these are places that in the evenings after I was done with work, I would be refreshing Slack and looking at these things and whatnot. And they're still associated with like relaxation after work times for me. And so today I'm actually in the process of moving around the office, moving the desk into a different location, and giving myself a place where I'm like, this is when I'm sitting down at this desk, this is my work area. And if I wanted to, if it's time for me to go check the stats on the virus, refresh New York Times, I have to physically get up from that desk and move to someplace else, and then make it a relaxation time and a work time. So that's another tactic that I've recently implemented just this week, just to help myself, help the squirrel brain stop trying to look at everything that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Are you explicitly blocking news sites and stuff like that on your work machine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's every now and then I'll block Reddit on my host file because it's just habit to type Reddit or Facebook or all these other things. And that's like the only way that I can't like see the homepage and realize what I'm doing. I have to like have it completely error out. And then like, oh, right. I can't do that right now.
Yeah. There's an app called Self-Control for Mac that I was using for a while. It seems like it doesn't play well with Catalina, so I had to like find a couple others. But yeah, same deal where it just like updates your host file and you're locked down for like a couple of hours, and it's really it's helpful.
I love
to have
this.
that sort of it's helpful to have that sort of layer on top of it.
I'm going to get this after this. After we're done with this, I'm totally going to get that because it's a kind of a pain not to go to my host file and manually edit it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just simplifies that.
One thing that helped me a couple years ago, it's not as drastic, but I have my dock and my status bar set to auto hide. So when I'm not like an edge of my screen, I don't see the dock and I don't see the status bar. And therefore I also don't see any notification bubbles or anything. And of course, like I can still explicitly go down there and check stuff. But when I'm deeply into something, nothing can pop up that distracts me. And it sounded like a small change at first, but it has been had a huge effect on just staying, like, especially when you're like deep down working on something, it's so easy to get pulled out by a red bubble in your email account or something like that. Yeah. And it really helped to just hide those away.
I find it kind of evil that Apple decided to add notifications into the operating system. Like, imagine like having a computer back in like the 90s and how like distracted free that you would be. And now everything is designed to like constantly pop up these notifications. Like websites are constantly trying to send you notifications to the browser. And it's like, can we not?
Yeah, it really. I mean, you're joking about that, but it is totally true, isn't it? Like. That it feels like, especially right now, that over the past, 15 years, especially the last 5 years, every single app that has just become so a part of our workflow is also usually probably being optimized for like usage and engagement. And so these tools have become super, super efficient and worked their way into our workflow. They've also like gotten really good at reminding us that they're there and interrupting us. And so maybe a month or two ago, we would be talking about these sorts of tactics of like, here's how you get yourself focused in your workflow, set yourself up to be able to do deep work. Okay, good. But today, do all of those things, and there's this macro level of existential dread. So, like, how is Tiny Seed thinking through? Like your current portfolio companies, your upcoming rounds, talking to folks about like thinking through the risky idea of starting a business, investing in yourself, while this just unprecedented for us, for those of us that are in this generation living, with this unprecedented news going on. Like, how do you stay focused on building a company in this climate?
It was funny when this happened. Like, I joked about how we were wiping our brows, thanking ourselves that this is all remote. Yeah. But a lot of it was also just like, like everyone is affected by what's going on right now. We are included. When it's comes to bringing on new, like what's going to happen in say 6 or so months when applications open again, like what's going to be happening then? How are we going to adjust to this? What are the companies that are going to be available and still thriving in this climate? What can we do? Because a lot of it's like, we don't want Tiny Seed to go down either. In terms of the people that we're working with, us, like every other VC out there, I've seen a lot of chat about this, talking to their portfolio companies and changing the focus from growth at all costs to keeping as much money in the bank as at all costs. Don't work on some crazy initiative, crazy ad campaign that's risky, and that, could make it big, but also could deplete your bank account. This is not the time to do those kind of risks. This is not the time to hire a new salesperson, or do those like hires that you're like really excited to do, but you maybe, it was again, risky. Maybe you didn't have like a huge buffer in your bank. So we were advising the startups we're working with, to do this as well. We're working with them to, some of the startups we work with are having challenges right now. And, we're in a great place where we can help them out with those challenges and use our resources, use our network, use our mentorship to help them to overcome these challenges, which is great for Tiny Seed because that means that no one's really alone and we're all working together to help each other out. So it's just kind of like, one thing that we had to do, which is so frustrating for me, is we would usually get together in in-person retreats, and we had to move those retreats remotely. And it's those in-person retreats for a remote accelerator were kind of a key part of our business because that's how the people joining the next batch get to see each other in person, get this personal connection. We do some fun things together. We do some work things together. And then when we're doing these calls afterwards, then we have this connection to help you like open up and really feel like a family on these calls. And now where it's like, this has to be remote too. So we're going to be starting the new batch pretty soon. And we're working through ideas and a way to do like a remote retreat, which is also hard because all of our founders are all in different time zones. And it's nice when you're in person, everyone's on the same time zone. You can spend the whole day together. But really, we have 3 hours every day that works for everybody to do some sort of like onboarding activity to get everyone together. So we have some challenges and whatnot. I think we're doing really well because the startups we work with are bootstrappers, people who were bootstrappers. They raised some money with us, but they still have that bootstrapper mindset, which I think is going to be really, really good right now in this current climate because fundraising is going to be super hard. A lot of people out there, like there's ways of gaining capital. A lot of startups need capital right now because, a lot of prospects might have disappeared, especially if you're working with, say, physical businesses. You might be in big trouble because those physical businesses all right now are closed. And that's the nice thing about Tiny Seed is that you get some money for being in Tiny Seed to help you, might be able to help the startups survive this crisis. There's things like ladder capital. There's, what's the other one? There's a 4-letter one. I can't remember, but it takes your monthly subscriptions and gives you the money annually, if I recall.
Pipe or something?
Pipe, like yes, thank you. I have a weird memory thing where I always remember the length of a word, but not the word itself. And I'm happy that these things exist right now. I think 3-5 years ago, it was just like bootstrapping or VC. And luckily right now, there's a lot of different options for alternate ways of bringing in capital that will hopefully help as we go through this crisis together. It will help these smaller businesses, these bootstrap businesses continue on afterwards. So I think I got a little off track there. But those are some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of how lucky are at Tiny Seed, how lucky are we in the space. We are able to help these startups, kind of mentor these startups, and also just in general, where we are in 2020 in terms of the alternate funding space, which happens to be hopefully to help a lot of bootstrap businesses out and help them survive this crisis.
I mean, that's really helpful. I think I'm sitting here thinking through it. People who've been listening to the show for a while know that I had made the decision to look for a full-time job in late February, early March. This is not the best time in the world to to be trying to find a job. And so there's like, I'm like kind of hopping back and forth between this thing of, well, it's going to be difficult to look for work. But this is also not the time to be taking a big risk. And which is what you're saying, like advising companies, hey, don't take moonshots, don't run experiments that aren't probably going to work out. And I feel myself coming to this conclusion of, all right, double back down on consulting and get ready to launch your own business. That is one of the most risky things a person can do, I think, is to launch their own business. And I guess I'm curious, what's the conversation like at Tiny Seed in terms of these are the markets that are most likely to be to get through this downturn, or these are the types of businesses that are, what are they, close to sales, close to lead generation, not so much like other aspects of the business. Like, are there conversations like that happening, and what can you tell us there?
One thing that's funny about your what you just said about finding a new job is just before this happened, my husband quit his job. Like, his literal last day was the day that the self-isolation started here in Ontario. It's just like, it was like,
great timing.
That was timing.
Wow.
And so he's doing consulting as well. And luckily he quit his job. He's a founder type, I think, like all of us. And he quit his job with a lot of padding his bank because he wanted time to work on these new ideas and figure out what he's going to do. So luckily we had that padding before he quit, but there's a little bit of a moment that's like, I can't believe we're doing this right now. That was some timing. At least I have a full-time job. Yeah. And in terms of your question, in terms of, I can't really say what we're talking about specifics with the startups we're working on. There are some people, like I said, there's some people who are having challenges right now. And, it's just like that battening down the hatches. Some people are going to have to lay people off. Some people are going to have to differentiate their market. They might have to move into something else really quickly, or expand their market, or find another area that they can focus on, because suddenly their existing market evaporated. And at Tiny Seed, we really tried. We're trying not to be the kind of VC, the kind of investor that says, here's the thing you have to do. There's a lot of people who are like, okay, here's some advice, and this is what we say. And, the person's going to be like, okay. And then they, run off on their own little path. And there's no way we're going to be like, hey, you can't do that. Right, we're going to support them no matter what they do. But it's nice is we definitely picked up the amount of calls that we've been doing individually one-on-one with the startups. We've picked up the amount of time that we've been chatting with them and reaching out to them and making sure that everything's going okay, because we're also distracted with postponing Microconf. This has been a really tough time because we postponed Microconf for moving these retreats online. We have a lot of distracted with that. We are in the process of onboarding the new batch, going through due diligence, and the virus, which was hard because we still have our existing batch. And we realize is that because we're just so distracted with all these things, especially Microconf and what we're going to do with that we were not checking in with them. So last week we started doing more calls specifically to kind of chat with them, even if they're not reaching out to us, to make sure that we know where they are. So I'm not sure if that's a really good answer, but that's kind of how we've been surviving the last, say, 2 weeks, in addition to being very distracted ourselves. Because we're not just like an investment firm. It's very tied into Microconf, and that's been really rough.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a huge value of Tiny Seed specifically is the network, the hallway track of Microconf, but even more focused and throughout the year.
Well, honestly, it's nice that we're so tied into Microconf as well, because it's not just Tiny Seed; it is Tiny Seed and Microconf. So the founders that we have and we bring on have two networks to choose from. They have a very small personal network, but they also have this huge network. And it's honestly, the Microconf, a lot of people hate Slack. There's a lot of reasons why we use Slack rather than Discord or whatnot. But we did just start that Slack workspace, and that was something in the works before this happened. And that's another thing we're like, woo, we're really happy that happened to launch right when this happened, because now we have this place where Bootstrap founders in the Microconf community that would be normally getting together in person in April in Minneapolis, which was like our first year not doing it in Las Vegas, which is a little devastating. But now we have this place where people can have the support from other founders. If you're having troubles with your business, there's for Tiny Seed, they have two networks to ask from, but at least with the Bootstrap community as a whole, there's this new, in addition to other networks that are out there, we have now a Microconf network for people to get that one-on-one or group help that unfortunately won't happen in person for a while.
This is going to be my first year at Microconf, and so so I am so bummed. But back to like distractions and focus. What's your advice for founders right now who are seeing the conditions change, the environment change, and maybe their business is dipping? How do you advise them to think through, okay, things are changing. Should we shift our focus a bit to respond to this, or stay the course, stay focused on what we've been doing? Like, how do you make that decision when things change so radically?
First thing I would say is, in the words of Douglas Adams, don't panic. It's very, go for a walk, get some sleep.
Yeah.
This is really scary times. And especially if it's affecting your business personally, things aren't going to happen in the next 2 weeks, hopefully, for your business. It's not going to die if you suddenly have to take a full week off just to deal with what's going on. Get away from your computer. Don't make any progress. Do a lot of social isolation walks. Get a lot of sleep, put yourself in a good brain space to actually then make the right decisions, because it's not going to help any founder if they're stressed out, underslept, distracted by everything that's going on, squirrel brain is happening, to then make decisions. So first thing I would say is put yourself in a right space and give yourself the time and mental ability to make the right decisions. The next thing would be also, take advantage of those advisors, the community, the other people, people to help you look at beyond that tunnel of vision that you have on your business. See what other people say in addition to the ideas that you have, because there might be something that's really big that you might be missing. This is, again, the 9 years I worked in Wedding Lovely and then the time I work at Tiny Seed, but both of these like inform my experiences, but a lot of it was just like failing so hard at Wedding Lovely. And that's something I never really did, was ask for help. I took pride in my ability to just make all my decisions. Like, I was the founder and I was making the decisions, and I know what I'm doing because I'm the one who's working on this day after day. And then in looking back in those 9 years, I'm like, what could have happened at year 3 if I had talked to people, got this idea for something I got in like year 8? What would have happened to the business at that moment? What are the things that I missed by not asking for help or asking people what they thought? And so I look back on as one of my biggest things I've learned at that time at Wedding Lovely. In terms of making those decisions about stay the course, try something new, if possible, I'm a huge fan of having eggs in multiple baskets. And that's, again, at Wedding Lovely, one of the reasons why I was able to last 9 years is that it wasn't only a marketplace, which is famously hard to work on, a marketplace in the wedding space, which is also famously a horrible space to be in. I can do a whole podcast about how horrible the wedding space is. Don't launch an app in it. It's crazy. And the thing that helped me survive those 9 years was the fact that it wasn't just a marketplace, but it was also a SaaS app. It was a wedding planning app for people. It was also a blog that had affiliate revenue coming in. It had all these different pieces of the business that were bringing in the revenue. So when something dropped, that the other pieces of the business could pick up for it. And so the counterpoint here is that this is something I did at Wedding Lovely as well, is that by having these multiple things you work on, you are going to be distracting yourself from working on what matters. So by having this blog that I was updating, I got a lot of affiliate revenue from it. It was a lot of the like good 50% of the revenue from Wedding Lovely was just through the blog. But that also meant that I was so involved in running this that the development of the apps I was working on went down. So there's a balance. It helped me survive the tough times when the apps weren't doing so well, or when the blog, Google dropped some of my SEO for a couple of these really key posts, and so my revenue just disappeared overnight. I had other parts of the business that were still running, and I was able to, keep working on it because I had these eggs in multiple baskets. But it also meant that I had this constant feeling of juggling 6 balls. But I can only really juggle 4 at a time. So there's 2 in the ground. And so what are the 2 balls that I was not working on? What are the things that are lagging behind the business? So long story short, I'm a big fan of multiple eggs in multiple baskets, but there has to be some kind of awareness in terms of what those other baskets are, how you'll be just like spending your time, how labor intensive those other ventures would be. I would recommend to look at other places to bring in revenue, look at other places to differentiate your thing, but also just be aware of how much that could be a distraction from the other thing and make sure there's a balance there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the art side of it, isn't it? is knowing how much diversification is too much, so that then you're spread too thin. How much single focus is way too risky. Like, I
want to mention one thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say there's no formula. There's no single. There's no what is it, like the unified theory of entrepreneurship. There's not an algorithm that you're just going to pop all of this stuff into and come out on the other side.
One thing I want to mention that really helped me at Wedding Lovely for all of these things is when I was doing these different ventures, and there's like a certain amount of maintenance for every one of these things that needed to happen to keep them running when I was like distracted by these other parts of the business. So for the blog, was running those blog posts, and for the marketplace, it was responding to the businesses that are on the platform and the people using the platform, responding to their support requests, for the app. So there's a lot of these like little daily activities, and one of the smartest things I did was to hire a virtual assistant. This was a virtual assistant that was in the Philippines. So she was the rate was really reasonable for me as a small business owner. And it allowed me to not distract myself with those like daily activities, and have another person to lean on. So if you're a solo founder, I'm a huge fan of virtual assistants or someone to help you out. There's a lot of websites out there that are US based that help you find a virtual assistant. They can be very expensive. It'd be like $25 an hour. Trying to find the right person who's remote that really works for you. I have a whole article on this actually, on how I found this virtual assistant, and how I was able to use the Philippines there's like a local website for Philippines based virtual assistants that I used. And I'll pass that link over. But it was one of the things that, again, at Wedding Lovely that really helped me stay on track, because I wasn't hiring a US-based support person that was really expensive, that was really going to like stress my business. I was able to find the right person that was really cheap in order to keep the business on. And I feel like that's some things you have to do as a bootstrap founder. That might be something you have to do right now in this current climate. It sucks to say this. You might have to lay off your support people who are local and hire people who are offshore, just to keep your business running. But that's, I guess, what you have to really work on and focus on if your business is in trouble with this current climate.
Yeah, it does seem like the being able to identify those day-to-day or weekly tasks that have to get done, identifying those, getting them off of your plate, just knowing that they're going to happen. It's like the importance of hiring a good bookkeeper. so that then your brain is not like constantly going back to this Excel document somewhere that that needs to be accurate, that needs to be done, allows you to stay focused on the longer term, longer term planning of the business, working on the business rather than in it, as they always say.
I mean, that goes right back to the topic of this show, right? Is that you feel like you're getting work done when you decide to save money, don't hire that bookkeeper, so you're doing the bookkeeping yourself. So there could be a part of you that's saying, cool, I'm doing the right thing by doing it myself. But you realize that what you're doing is taking away from your ability to do development or do the ideation or do sales for your business by distracting yourself by doing this bookkeeping stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Benedikt and I were talking about this, I think 3 or 4 episodes ago. I have just had this just frustrating inner feeling of like, we're 30 episodes in and I have 0 MRR. I am just infuriated with myself about that. On the one hand, like just feeling like, what the heck have I been doing? I've been operating this thing and like keeping my family afloat, doing all of this. That on the one hand, you've done it. Like that is, you've made progress there. You've at least like sustained something. But this other feeling of like the building the longer lasting asset that is going to start moving itself forward. That feels like when you're talking about being distracted by things that feel like progress, they have to get done, but not seeing like the bigger wheel start moving, like that completely resonates with my current situation. So yeah, thanks for all that.
Yeah,
like, got a page full of notes here that I'm going to be referring back to.
I mean, these are all these things. They always sound really nice. Also, in the abstract, I will have to admit that I struggle with these things every day myself.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think like this is what I think is helpful about conversations like this one, and just like the podcast space generally, is that it's really hard. I think it's really hard to give specific and contextual advice, so much as here's a way to think about this. Does that resonate? Does that sound true to you, listener? And so how would you take this like general advice, these observations at a higher level and apply them to your specific example? So I think, we joked about it, or like everybody can relate to feeling distracted, wanting to be focused, but then also wondering, well, what the heck what's the right thing to focus on? So Benedikt, any closing thoughts from you? Any other questions, man?
No, not right now. You're a talented interviewer. It's a pleasure to watch you work.
Tracy, it was a pleasure to have you and to get your thoughts.
Yeah, this was super fun.
Okay, well, maybe later in 2020 we will meet in person at Microconf in Minneapolis, and if not, then hopefully somewhere else soon. So
hopefully
thanks
by
so
the
much
time,
for joining us.
Sorry about that.
No.
I was gonna say, hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have the new dates announced for when it's postponed, because it's postponed. So that's at this moment is being negotiated with the hotel, and then hopefully that'll be out.
Got it. Well, we run a very off-brand, very fast production schedule. So this is going to go out tomorrow.
Oh, there we go.
We are slow and steady, but our podcast production schedule is not.
It's fast, quick and scrappy.
It is quick and scrappy. But no, in all seriousness, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that you did. And we look forward to continuing to see great stuff coming from Microconf and from all of y'all at Tiny Seed.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun to talk about these things that have been very relevant right now. It's a very, very weird time of life, I guess.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, listeners, thanks for tuning in. Show notes at slowandsteadypodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at slowsteadypod. Talk to you next week.